The colony on Epsilon 7 was known across the galaxy as Earth's weakest. It was a harsh, dry world, barely able to support life, and the few thousand humans who called it home were seen as rejects, people sent away by the government when no one else wanted them. No fancy weapons, no powerful defenses, just grit and old-fashioned stubbornness. The Zarkon Empire, a ruthless alien force, looked at the colony like it was nothing, a soft target to crush without effort. One dusty morning, huge black warships appeared in the sky, blocking out the twin suns and casting long shadows across the cracked Earth. The colony's warning sirens blared, but there was no time to waste. The attack was about to begin. Among the colonists was Jace, a quiet man with a sharp mind and steady hands. He wasn't a soldier, but years of surviving on this harsh world had made him smart and tough. He had studied old Earth tactics, hunting methods, and guerrilla warfare from broken records and faded books. Jace knew the invaders would underestimate them, and he planned to use that against them. The Zarkon troops stormed down from their ships, armed with advanced weapons, machines, and drones. They expected an easy win. Their mechanical soldiers marched through the settlement, tearing down the simple huts and grabbing whatever supplies they could. But Jace and the colonists didn't run. Instead, when he gave the signal, hidden traps sprung to life. Buried beneath the dust were explosives made from old mining gear, set up carefully over years. Tripwires stretched between jagged rocks triggered sudden blasts. Camouflaged pits filled with sharp spikes caught many invaders off guard. The Zarkon soldiers stumbled, trapped and confused. Then, Jace activated the colony's secret weapon, an energy pulse device built from scavenged parts and powered by rare minerals from the planet. A blast of electromagnetic energy surged through the valley, shutting down the invaders' machines and weapons for precious seconds. The Zarkon troops panicked. Their mechanical soldiers froze and crashed, drones fell from the sky, and their weapons went silent. The colonists charged forward with rusty rifles, mining tools, and fists. Despite their weakness, the colonists fought fiercely, driven by the will to survive. Jace led a group to take over the invaders' landing zone, while others destroyed their supply caches. The invaders' pride shattered in minutes. Within 7 minutes, the Zarkon ships retreated, broken and humiliated. The weakest colony had done what no one thought possible. They had wiped out the invaders in a flash. The moment the Zarkon ships disappeared over the dusty horizon, the colony burst into a strange mixture of celebration and disbelief. For years, everyone had believed they were weak, helpless, and doomed to live as forgotten outcasts on this rough planet. But now, they had proven something different. They had survived, and not just survived. They had defeated a brutal alien force in just 7 minutes. Jace stood among the crowd, breathing hard, his heart pounding like a drum. He wiped dust and sweat from his brow and looked around at the faces of the people he had lived alongside for years. They were battered, bruised, and exhausted. But there was something new in their eyes, a fierce pride, a fire that hadn't been there before. This isn't just luck, Jace thought. It's something else, something we earned. The colony leaders quickly gathered at the makeshift command center, a simple stone building that barely held up against the fierce winds of Epsilon 7. Jace was called in, along with a few others who had helped plan the defenses. Mara, the colony's de facto strategist before Jace stepped up, greeted him with a tired but genuine smile. "You did good out there," she said quietly. "We all did." Jace nodded, but his mind was already racing ahead. The Zarkon Empire was powerful, and this attack had been just one wave. If they thought the colony was weak, they wouldn't stop after one defeat. They would come back stronger, with more soldiers and bigger weapons. "We need to prepare," Jace said. "This was just a test. They'll be back." The leaders agreed. The colony couldn't afford to wait. The few scraps of advanced technology they had scavenged from the invaders' wreckage were studied carefully, and the engineers worked day and night to repair and improve their traps and weapons. Every able-bodied colonist was trained, not just in basic combat, but in using the environment to their advantage. The harsh planet, once a curse, was now a weapon. Jace spent hours walking the perimeter of the colony, studying the land like a hunter tracking prey. He knew every rock, every ridge, every hidden crevice that could be used in a fight. The dust storms that had made life miserable were now cover for ambushes. The dry riverbeds could hide explosive charges. The planet's rare minerals could power their energy weapons more efficiently. But it wasn't just about tools and weapons. It was about the people. Jace understood that no matter how many machines or tricks they had, the colony's greatest strength was their spirit, their refusal to give up, even when everything was against them. One evening, as the twin suns set behind the jagged mountains, Jace sat alone on a ridge overlooking the colony. The sky turned a deep orange, fading to purple as night settled in. The air was cool now, and the stars began to twinkle faintly. He thought about the attack, how fast it had happened, how close it came to disaster. If a few traps hadn't worked perfectly, if the energy pulse device hadn't fired at the right moment, the colony might have been wiped out like so many others in the galaxy. But they weren't wiped out. They fought back. They won. His thoughts were interrupted by a soft voice behind him. Mara had come to join him. "You're thinking too much," she said, sitting down beside him. Jace shrugged. "I can't stop. Not now. We all feel it, but overthinking will kill us. We have to keep moving. Keep improving." She pulled a small device from her pocket, a simple data pad. "Look at this," she said, handing it to him. It showed images taken from the invaders' ships before they left. Huge fleets gathering far away, preparations for a full invasion. Jace's jaw tightened. "So they're serious about this," Mara nodded. "We have maybe 2 months before the next wave hits. We need to be ready." The next weeks were a blur of activity. The colony transformed from a scattered group of survivors into a disciplined community focused on survival and resistance. Schools turned into training grounds. Engineers crafted new weapons and improved old ones. Farmers dug trenches and set traps. Everyone had a role, and everyone trained hard. Jace found himself in a leadership role. It wasn't official. There were no military ranks here, but the colonists trusted him because he had shown they could win. He made plans, taught tactics, and coordinated defense teams. It was exhausting, but it gave him purpose. One night, while walking through the settlement, Jace overheard a conversation that chilled him. 2 colonists were talking about giving up, about surrendering when the invaders returned. They said maybe Earth had forgotten about this place for a reason, that the colony was too weak to fight a real war. Jace stopped and looked at them. "Weak?" he said quietly. "We're not weak. We just haven't had a chance to show what we're made of." The colonists needed hope, and Jace knew he had to be the one to give it. As the days passed, the colony's defenses grew stronger, but the fear of the next attack loomed large. The people who had once felt forgotten now felt watched, hunted. Every strange noise, every shadow in the dark sent hearts racing. Finally, the day came. The sky turned dark as Zarkon warships returned, bigger and more numerous than before, but this time the colony was ready. Jace stood at the front line, his rifle slung over his shoulder and a new energy blade strapped to his side. Around him, colonists manned the improved traps and weapons, eyes sharp and steady. When the invaders landed, they found no easy target. Instead, they faced a fortress built from years of hardship and determination. The battle was fierce and long, unlike the quick raid before. But the colony fought with the fury of people who had nothing left to lose. Jace moved through the chaos, leading charges, rescuing trapped colonists, and striking down enemies with precision. Hours passed, and the tide turned. The invaders faltered, their machines breaking down under relentless attacks and clever traps. By the time the twin suns began to rise, the invaders were in full retreat. The colony had not only survived, they had won again. Jace looked out over the battlefield, smoke rising from the wreckage, and felt a deep pride. The weakest colony was no longer weak. They were a force to be reckoned with. But Jace knew this was only the beginning. The galaxy was watching now, and their fight was far from over. The morning after the second battle dawned cold and quiet. The twin suns of Epsilon 7 peeked over the horizon, casting a pale light on the shattered landscape, where the invaders' ships had fallen like dark scars on the dusty ground. The air still smelled of smoke and burning metal, but the colony was alive and stronger than ever. Jace walked through the settlement, his boots crunching on broken debris, eyes scanning the faces of the survivors. People were tired, some limping from wounds, others pale from exhaustion. But there was something new in the way they carried themselves, a mix of relief, pride, and hardened resolve. Mara joined him as he approached the command center. "We did it," she said softly, watching the colony buzz with renewed energy. "We survived the worst they could throw at us." Jace nodded but kept his face serious. "They'll be back. Maybe not soon, but they'll try again." The leaders had gathered inside the command center. The room was filled with maps, broken pieces of alien tech, and scattered data pads. The colony's survival depended on turning what they had learned from the fights into strength for the future. "We have to understand who we're up against," Jace said, tapping on the map. "The Zarkon Empire isn't just another alien threat. They're organized, ruthless, and adaptive. Every battle they lose makes them more dangerous." Mara frowned. "They came here thinking this place was a joke, a weak colony no one cared about. Now they see us as a problem." Jace's jaw tightened. And problems don't get ignored. For days, Jace and the colony's scientists worked to recover data from the invaders' wreckage. Broken drones, shattered weapons, and scorched uniforms were carefully examined. The information was limited, but it revealed one chilling truth. The Zarkon Empire had already crushed many other human colonies before, with brutal efficiency. Epsilon 7 was their first real failure. This knowledge was both terrifying and motivating. It meant the colony wasn't just fighting for itself. It was fighting for the idea that humans could survive against overwhelming odds. Late one evening, Jace met with a small group of colonists in a quiet corner of the settlement. They were the colony's best minds, engineers, and fighters. Among them was Tarek, a tall, wiry man known for his skill with weapons, and Lila, a sharp-witted engineer who had built much of their energy pulse tech. "We need a plan to strike back," Jace said, pacing slowly. "Waiting for them to attack again isn't enough. We have to take the fight to them." Tarek nodded. "They're organized like a machine. If we can disrupt their supply lines or hit their command ships, we can slow them down." Lila added, "I've been working on modifying the pulse device. If we can increase its range and power, maybe we can take out their communications before they even land." Jace looked at each of them, feeling the weight of responsibility. "It's risky. We're still small, still weak in numbers. But if we don't act, they'll come back stronger. We either fight smart or we die waiting." The group agreed to start preparing a strike team, small, fast, and deadly. They would need to gather intelligence, plan carefully, and use every advantage the planet gave them. Meanwhile, the colony's morale began to shift. Stories of their victories spread, and more people who had once doubted them started to believe in their cause. The weak colony was becoming a symbol, not just of survival, but of resistance. But Jace knew the cost was high. Every day, more families buried their dead, and every night he dreamed of the faces lost in battle. The colony had won, yes, but victory came with pain. One night, Jace stood at the edge of the settlement, staring into the dark sky. The stars seemed distant and cold, but beneath them, the planet hummed with life, the stubborn, fierce life of people refusing to give up. Suddenly, a sharp noise behind him made Jace turn. It was Mara, carrying a small satchel. "I found something," she said quietly, handing him a datapad. "Intercepted a transmission from their fleet." Jace's eyes scanned the message, a warning from the Zarkon commanders about a possible human rebellion spreading across nearby systems. It spoke of a secret weapon humans were developing, something powerful enough to challenge the Empire's control. Jace's heart raced. Could it be a chance to end this war? Or was it another trap? The colony's leaders debated fiercely over the next days. Some wanted to strike immediately, riding the momentum of their victories. Others warned caution, fearing the Zarkon's retaliation. Jace pushed for a middle ground. "We don't have the luxury of waiting forever, but we need to be prepared. We'll send a small team to scout the enemy fleet, gather intelligence, find weaknesses. Then we decide." The decision was made, and Jace was chosen to lead the mission. He spent the next week training with his team. Tarek, Lila, and a handful of others who had proven themselves in battle. They learned to move quietly through the rocky terrain, use new weapons, and communicate without detection. On the night of their departure, the colony gathered to see them off. The mood was somber but hopeful. They were sending a piece of themselves into the enemy's lair, but it was a risk they had to take. Jace looked at the faces around him. Friends, neighbors, strangers bound by fate. He promised himself he wouldn't fail them. The team set out just before dawn, moving across the planet's barren surface toward the distant mountains where the Zarkon fleet had been spotted. The journey was hard. The terrain was rough, and the constant fear of discovery kept everyone alert. They traveled by night, resting in small caves during the day. On the fourth night, they reached a ridge overlooking the enemy's hidden base, a massive, heavily guarded station carved into the mountain's side. From here, Jace could see ships docked and troops moving below. The team set up a small observation post, sending encrypted reports back to the colony with every detail. As they watched, Jace realized how vast the enemy's power truly was. Hundreds of ships, thousands of soldiers, and weapons that dwarfed anything the colony had seen. But he also noticed cracks, disorganization, supply delays, and the invaders' frustration after their failures on Epsilon 7. That night, Jace gathered his team. "We've seen what we're up against, but we've also seen their weaknesses. It's time to strike." The plan was daring. Infiltrate the base, plant explosives on the main power grid, and disrupt the fleet's operations. The mission was dangerous. Failure meant death. Success meant a chance to turn the tide of the war. Under cover of darkness, the team moved silently through tunnels and security patrols. Jace's heart pounded with every step, but he kept his focus sharp. They planted the charges carefully, setting timers to give them enough time to escape. As they retreated, alarms blared. The base was waking up to the attack. The team sprinted through the twisting corridors, dodging guards and automated defenses. Explosions rocked the station behind them, cutting power and throwing the invaders into chaos. When they finally burst outside into the cold night air, the base was already crippled. Ships were stranded on landing pads, soldiers confused and disorganized. Jace looked back once, then led the team toward the safety of the mountains. The mission was a success, but it was only the beginning. As they disappeared into the dark, Jace knew one thing for sure. The colony might be the weakest, but it was no longer defenseless. The war had changed, and so had they. The mountains loomed dark and silent around Jace and his team as they slipped away from the crippled Zarkan base. Their lungs burned from the cold, dry air of Epsilon 7, and every muscle ached from the long trek. But their spirits were high. They had struck a powerful blow against the invaders, and the colony was waiting for their return. Still, Jace knew better than to celebrate too soon. The Zarkons were ruthless and well-equipped. Their retaliation would be swift and merciless. For now, survival was their priority. The group moved cautiously, taking the longest, least expected routes back to the colony. Terek, ever the scout, kept watch ahead while Lila checked the timers on their last explosives, ensuring none were left behind to betray their position. The night was pitch black, with only the faint glow of distant stars illuminating the rocky landscape. As they climbed higher into the mountains, the harsh terrain slowed their progress. Loose stones slid beneath their boots, and hidden crevices threatened to swallow an unsteady footstep. Jace's mind raced, not just with the physical challenges, but the looming threat of the Zarkons discovering their sabotage. "We can't stay exposed out here much longer," Terek whispered, eyes sharp. "They'll send search parties soon." Jace nodded. "We push through. We're almost there." Hours later, just before dawn, the ragged group finally reached the edge of a narrow canyon. Below lay the sprawling colony, its dim lights twinkling like stars against the dark earth. The sight filled Jace with a mixture of relief and determination. But the danger wasn't over. A sudden, sharp noise echoed from the canyon, a low hum that grew steadily louder. Mechanical drones, hunting for signs of their presence. "Ambush!" Jace hissed, pulling his rifle as the team scrambled for cover behind rocky outcrops. The drones swept in, scanning the area with cold red sensors. Lila raised her device, unleashing a pulse that briefly disabled their systems, causing several drones to crash into the canyon walls. The team used the moment to move, but more drones were closing in fast. Terek fired sharply, taking down one drone after another, but their numbers were overwhelming. "We need to split up," Jace shouted. "Terek, take the left ridge. Lila, follow me to the right." They dashed in opposite directions, weaving through rocks and dust clouds. Jace's breath came hard as he zigzagged through narrow paths, the drone sensors still searching. He reached a ledge overlooking the canyon floor and fired a final shot that brought down a pursuing drone. The team regrouped near the canyon's mouth, bruised and breathless but intact. "That was close," Lila said, wiping sweat from her brow. "Too close." Jace gave a grim nod. "They're desperate. They'll try anything to catch us." Back in the colony, the mood was tense. Word of the successful strike spread quickly, but so did the warnings of Zarkon counterattacks. Leaders met daily to strategize, balancing the need to defend the settlement while planning further missions. Jace found himself at the center of it all. His success had made him a natural leader, but the pressure weighed heavily. He couldn't ignore the growing exhaustion on his face or the dark circles beneath his eyes. One evening, Mara approached him in the command center, her voice low. "You're pushing too hard, Jace. You need rest." He shook his head. "There's no time for rest. If we don't stay ahead, we'll lose everything." She gave him a sad smile. "And if you break, we lose our best hope." Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden alert. A reconnaissance drone spotted far above the colony, moving silently through the sky. Jace's heart sank. The Zarkons were still watching, still hunting. The colony scrambled to prepare. Defensive squads manned the lookout posts, ready to sound alarms. Engineers worked on jamming signals and improving their early warning systems. Over the next week, the colony's defenses were tested repeatedly. Small skirmishes erupted along the borders, each time pushing the colonists to their limits. The invaders were learning, adapting, but so were the humans. Jace led patrols into the wastelands, gathering intelligence and striking at supply lines. Each mission was more dangerous than the last, but with every victory, the colony's confidence grew. Yet, beneath the surface, doubts crept in. Not everyone believed victory was possible. Some whispered that the colony's fight was futile against such a vast empire. Fear and despair lingered like a shadow. One afternoon, Jace found himself in a quiet corner of the settlement, speaking with a young colonist named Myra. She was barely 18, but had fought bravely in the battles. "Do you ever wonder if it's all worth it?" she asked, eyes wide and honest. Jace looked at her, remembering his own fears. "Every day," he admitted, "but I believe we're fighting for something bigger than ourselves. For our future." Mira nodded slowly, a spark of hope lighting her face. As the colony strengthened, a new threat emerged. Reports came in of other human settlements falling to the Zarkons, some wiped out completely. The invaders' reach was vast, and their brutality unmatched. Jace and the leaders realized they couldn't fight alone. They needed allies. Other colonies, human resistance groups scattered across the stars. Sending messages through encrypted channels, the colony reached out, sharing information, strategies, and hope. Slowly, a network of resistance began to form. It was a fragile alliance, built on trust and desperation, but it gave the colonists something they hadn't felt in a long time: a chance. One evening, as the twin suns set behind the mountains, Jace stood once more on the ridge overlooking the colony. The stars above seemed brighter, filled with silent promises. He clenched his fists, feeling the weight of the fight ahead. The Zarkons were powerful, but the colony was no longer weak. They were human. They were survivors. And they would not go quietly into the night. The alliance was fragile, but it was the best hope the colony had. Jace spent long hours communicating with distant settlements, sharing their successes and failures, learning from others' experiences. Every message carried a silent plea. "We're not alone." The network of resistance was growing, small, scattered pockets of humans fighting back, refusing to bow to the Zarkon Empire's rule. It was a dangerous game, but Jace believed that if these pockets could unite, they could become a force strong enough to challenge the Empire itself. Back on Epsilon 7, life settled into a tense routine. The colony worked non-stop, repairing damaged defenses, training new recruits, and preparing for the inevitable next assault. The twin suns rose and set over a land that was no longer just a barren wasteland, but a battlefield where hope and despair clashed every day. One morning, Jace received a coded message from a nearby settlement called New Haven. Their transmission was urgent. Zarkon forces were massing nearby, preparing for a massive strike. Jace called an emergency meeting of the colony's leaders. The room was crowded, the air thick with tension. "We have little time," Jace said, pacing in front of a holographic map displaying troop movements. "If New Haven falls, the Empire's forces will be even closer. We need to help them." Mara, ever pragmatic, frowned. "Our defenses are stretched thin. If we send help, we risk weakening ourselves." Jace met her gaze. "If we don't act, New Haven falls, and then they come for us next." The room was silent. The choice was clear but risky. That night, under the cover of darkness, Jace led a strike team toward New Haven. The journey was long and perilous, moving through hostile terrain and avoiding Zarkon patrols. The team was small but skilled. Engineers, fighters, and scouts who knew how to move quietly and strike hard. As they approached New Haven, the signs of battle were everywhere. Burned-out vehicles, crumbled walls, and distant explosions echoed through the night. Jace's heart pounded. This was no longer just about survival. It was about saving a fellow colony and sending a message to the Empire that humanity wouldn't back down. The team slipped inside New Haven's ruined perimeter, joining the defenders who were exhausted but unbroken. Together, they planned a counterattack. Using the element of surprise, guerrilla tactics, and the terrain, they aimed to hit the Zarkan forces where it hurt most, their supply lines and command centers. The battle that followed was fierce. Explosions lit the night sky, and the air was thick with smoke and the cries of combat. Jace moved through the chaos, coordinating attacks and rallying fighters. Despite the Zarkon's superior numbers and technology, the defenders fought with the same fierce determination Jace had seen before, the will to protect their home and each other. Hours later, as dawn approached, the Zarkon forces began to retreat, their losses heavy. New Haven was saved, for now. But the victory came at a cost. Many fighters were lost, and the colony's defenses were damaged. Back on Epsilon 7, news of the victory spread quickly. The resistance network gained new strength, inspired by the bravery of those who fought against impossible odds. Jace returned home a hero, but the weight of leadership pressed heavily on him. The war was far from over. In the following weeks, the colony continued to build its strength, learning from every battle, every loss. Jace spent nights studying alien tech recovered from New Haven and previous fights, working with engineers to adapt it for their use. One evening, Mara approached him with a grave expression. "We've intercepted another Zarkon transmission," she said, handing over a data pad. "They're planning a full-scale invasion, much bigger than before." Jace's face hardened. "How soon?" "Less than a month." The colony had little time to prepare. Over the next weeks, every colonist worked tirelessly. Defensive walls were reinforced, weapons stockpiled, and training intensified. Jace coordinated with allied colonies, sharing intel and planning joint defenses. The night before the invasion, Jace walked through the colony, stopping to speak with families, fighters, and children alike. He told them what he believed, that they were stronger than they'd ever been, that their fight was not just for survival, but for the future of humanity. When dawn broke, the skies darkened with the massive Zarkon fleet. The battle that followed was unlike any before. For hours, the colony endured wave after wave of attacks, airstrikes, ground troops, and powerful war machines. But this time, the colony was ready. Every trap was set, every weapon fired, every fighter fought with the strength of a people who refused to be broken. Jace led from the front, his voice carrying orders and encouragement. Amidst the chaos, moments of heroism shone brightly. Fighters risking everything to save others, engineers racing to repair damaged defenses, families banding together in hope. As the battle reached its climax, the energy pulse weapons, now more powerful than ever, sent surges of electromagnetic energy that disabled the invaders' machines and communications. The Zarkon forces faltered. With one final push, the colonists drove the invaders back. When the dust settled, the colony stood victorious, battered but unbowed. Jace looked out over the settlement, knowing the fight was far from over, but for the first time, he felt hope that humanity might win. The battle had ended, but the scars it left on the colony ran deep. Smoke still drifted from shattered buildings, the ground was torn by craters, and every face bore the weight of loss. The victory was real, but so was the cost. Jace walked through the settlement, the heavy silence pressing down on him. Families were grieving, medics rushed between makeshift triage centers, and the tired fighters cleaned their weapons, some staring blankly into the fading light. Despite the exhaustion, Jace knew they had to act quickly. The Zarkon Empire was vast and brutal. This battle was only a single front in a much larger war. The colony's survival depended on rebuilding and preparing for what was coming next. Inside the command center, Jace and Mara reviewed the battle reports. The invaders had been pushed back, but their losses had been replaced quickly by reinforcements from deep space. "We held them off," Mara said quietly. "But they're not done. Not by a long shot." Jace nodded. "We've slowed them down, but their fleet is still massive. We need allies, stronger ones." That night, Jace sent out new messages, this time reaching beyond the scattered human colonies. There were rumors of other civilizations, alien worlds oppressed by the Zarkon Empire's expansion. If even a few could be convinced to join the resistance, it might change the war's course. Days passed without reply. The waiting was hard. Jace spent hours scanning the stars, hoping for any sign that help was coming. Then, unexpectedly, the response came. A small fleet of ships, sleek and unlike anything humans had built, arrived near Epsilon 7's orbit. The vessels carried unknown symbols and glowed with unfamiliar energy. They hailed the colony with a message of solidarity, a coalition of alien species who also opposed the Zarkon Empire. Jace felt a spark of hope, like never before. For the first time, they weren't alone in this fight. The alien leaders, strange beings with sharp eyes and calm voices, met with Jace and the colony's council. They offered technology, strategic advice, and fighters ready to stand alongside humans. The coalition was fragile, built on shared desperation, but it was a beginning. Training began immediately. Colonists learned to operate new weapons and vehicles. The alien allies shared knowledge of the Zarkon's tactics and weaknesses. Jace worked closely with their commanders, planning joint operations that could strike deep into enemy territory. Life in the colony changed fast. The simple outpost was becoming a hub of resistance, a beacon for others who refused to surrender. But not everyone welcomed the newcomers. Some colonists feared the aliens, strangers who brought unknown technology and strange customs. Suspicion and mistrust simmered beneath the surface. Jace understood the fear. He'd felt it himself when the first alien ships arrived. But he also saw the bigger picture. Survival required unity. One evening, Mara found him overlooking the colony from a high ridge. "People are scared," she said softly. "Some are talking about leaving." Jace sighed. "I don't blame them. Change is hard, but we can't afford to turn on each other now." She nodded. "We need to build trust." Together they organized meetings, bringing humans and aliens together to share stories, food, and ideas. Slowly, barriers began to fall. Meanwhile, the Coalition's scouts brought urgent news. The Zarkons were preparing a massive assault on a nearby human settlement, a key supply hub that, if lost, would cut off support to Epsilon 7. Jace and the Coalition commanders agreed. They had to stop the attack. The mission was risky. They planned a coordinated strike, with humans and aliens working side by side. Jace led the ground forces while the alien pilots took to the skies. The battle was fierce and chaotic. Explosions rocked the settlement as defenders fought desperately against overwhelming numbers. Jace's team moved through rubble-strewn streets, pushing back the invaders with close-quarters combat and guerrilla tactics. Alien warriors fought alongside humans, their weapons and abilities unlike anything Jace had seen. The combination of human grit and alien technology was powerful. After hours of brutal fighting, the Zarkons were forced to retreat, leaving behind a battlefield littered with wreckage and fallen soldiers. Victory came at a cost, but it was a turning point. The Coalition had proven that together they could challenge the Empire's might. Back at Epsilon 7, the colony celebrated cautiously. There was hope, yes, but also the sober understanding that the war was far from over. Jace looked out at the stars from the command center's balcony. The galaxy was vast and filled with enemies, but also allies. The fight for survival had become a fight for freedom, and Earth's weakest colony was no longer weak. The victory at the supply hub had brought a wave of cautious optimism to Epsilon 7, but Jace knew better than to let hope blind him. The Zarkon Empire was vast, relentless, and far from defeated. Their next move would be bigger, more brutal, and likely unavoidable. In the weeks that followed, the colony and their new alien allies worked tirelessly to strengthen their defenses and deepen their cooperation. Alien technology was integrated into human weapons and vehicles, while human tactics adapted to include the unique abilities of their allies. Despite the advances, tension simmered beneath the surface. Some colonists still struggled to trust the aliens, while others feared their technology might one day be turned against humanity. Jace spent long hours walking among the people, listening, calming fears, and reminding everyone that unity was their only path to survival. One night, as twin moons cast a pale glow over the settlement, Jace met Mara near the training grounds. "There's unrest," she said quietly. "Small fights, heated words. Some want to push the aliens out." Jace sighed. "Fear is natural, but we've seen what happens when we're divided." "We need to do more," Mara said. "Bring everyone together." Together they organized a gathering, a festival of sorts, celebrating the strength of both humans and their new allies. Food, music, and stories were shared under the stars. Barriers began to break down as laughter replaced suspicion. But even as the colony found moments of peace, dark clouds gathered on the horizon. Scout ships brought alarming reports. A massive Zarkon fleet was moving through the outer systems, its destination clear: the heart of the human resistance. Jace and the coalition commanders convened an emergency council. The holographic map showed hundreds of ships, their formation tight and deadly. "This is it," Jace said grimly. "They're coming for us all." The colony prepared for a siege unlike any before. Defensive positions were fortified, weapons stockpiled, and evacuation plans made for non-combatants. In the days before the attack, Jace visited families, shared quiet moments with fighters, and steeled himself for what was to come. When the Zarkon fleet appeared in the system, the sky darkened with warships. The twin suns were eclipsed by shadows, and the colony's alarms blared. The battle began with a fury that shook the planet. Energy blasts lit the sky, explosions rocked the ground, and the air was filled with the roar of engines and cries of battle. Jace fought at the forefront, coordinating defense squads and rallying fighters. Alien warriors soared through the skies in their sleek ships, weaving between enemy vessels and striking with precision. The colony's energy pulse weapons, now more powerful and reliable, sent waves of electromagnetic blasts that crippled enemy machines and communications. Despite their strength, the Zarkons pushed hard, their numbers overwhelming. Hours stretched into a day as the battle raged on. The colony's defenses held, but the strain was immense. Supplies ran low, and fighters grew weary. In the heat of battle, a Zarkon command ship broke through the defenses and landed near the colony's center, deploying elite troops. Jace led a rapid response team to intercept them. The fight was brutal, hand-to-hand combat in the colony's streets. Jace moved with fierce determination, fighting not just for survival, but for the future of his people. The elite invaders were skilled and ruthless, but the colony's fighters matched them blow for blow. In the end, the command ship was destroyed, and the invaders were pushed back. As night fell, the battle slowed. Both sides regrouped, battered, and exhausted. Jace stood on a ridge overlooking the colony, the fires of battle casting flickering shadows across the landscape. He knew the fight was far from over, But the colony had survived. Stronger, united, and ready for what came next. The dust had barely settled when Jace stood amid the ruins of the colony's central square. Fires still smoldered, and the air was thick with smoke and ash. The long, brutal siege had tested every ounce of strength and willpower in the colony. Countless lives had been lost, yet the colony had endured. Against all odds, the weakest colony had become the fiercest resistance the galaxy had ever seen. Jace felt the weight of that victory heavy on his shoulders. The faces around him told stories of pain, loss, but also of hope and unbroken spirit. Survivors helped the wounded, salvaged what they could, and prepared to rebuild. The war was not over, not by a long shot, but for the first time, they had a glimpse of a future beyond mere survival. Days after the battle, the alien allies sent out a transmission. It was an official declaration. The coalition was expanding, inviting other oppressed planets and species to join the fight against the Zarkon Empire. The galaxy was waking up to the threat, and humanity's example on Epsilon 7 was a rallying cry. Jace met with the colony's leaders and alien commanders in the command center. The room was filled with maps, holographic displays, and tired but determined faces. "We've won a major battle, but the war continues," said Commander Sarah, the leader of the alien contingent. Her voice was calm but firm. "The Zarkon Empire will regroup. They will strike again, but this time they face a united front." Jace nodded. "We've proven that even the weakest can fight back. Now we need to turn that strength into lasting freedom." Mara, standing beside him, added, "The colony will rebuild stronger. We'll train more fighters, improve our defenses, and share our knowledge with our allies." The plan was ambitious. Establish a network of fortified colonies, supply routes protected by combined human and alien forces, and coordinated strikes deep into enemy territory. It was a war of endurance, strategy, and unity. Meanwhile, Jace took time to walk the colony, speaking with families and fighters alike. He listened to stories of sacrifice, resilience, and dreams for a better life. Children who once lived in fear now played in the streets, their laughter a quiet rebellion against the darkness. But Jace also faced his own struggles. The war had changed him, made him harder, sometimes distant. Nights brought restless dreams of battles lost and friends fallen. Yet each morning, he rose to lead, driven by the belief that their fight mattered. One evening, under the light of the twin moons, Mara joined him atop the ridge overlooking the colony. "We're not just survivors anymore," she said softly. "We're builders of a future." Jace looked out at the stars, feeling the vastness of the galaxy around them. "It's just the beginning." The months that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Colonies, once isolated, now communicated openly, sharing intelligence and resources. Alien technology transformed human weapons and defenses. Joint training programs created new generations of warriors prepared for the harsh realities ahead. Skirmishes continued across the stars, but each one strengthened the coalition's resolve. The Zarkons grew wary of the united resistance. Their arrogance was replaced by caution, and for the first time, whispers of rebellion reached even the highest echelons of their empire. Back on Epsilon 7, the colony became a symbol of hope, defiance, and the power of unity. Visitors came from distant worlds to learn from their example. Jace and Mara worked to build not just a military force, but a community where humans and aliens lived and thrived side by side. Yet challenges remained. Resources were scarce, losses still heavy, and the threat of betrayal ever present. The road to freedom was long and fraught with danger. Then came the intelligence that changed everything. a secret Zarkon superweapon under construction on a distant planet. A device capable of wiping out entire colonies with a single strike. The Coalition planned a daring mission to infiltrate and destroy the weapon before it could be completed. Jace was chosen to lead the assault team. The journey was perilous. The team traveled across hostile space, evading patrols and infiltrating enemy territory. The closer they got, the heavier the silence became, a tension that pressed on their nerves. When they finally reached the target, the team struck with precision and fury. Explosions tore through the enemy base, alarms blared, and fierce combat erupted. Jace fought with everything he had, his training, his courage, and the memories of all who depended on him. In the chaos, they succeeded. The superweapon was destroyed, its threat ended. But the victory came at a cost. Several team members were lost, including some close to Jace. The return to Epsilon 7 was bittersweet. The colony welcomed them as heroes, but the losses were keenly felt. Standing once more on the ridge overlooking the colony, Jace reflected on the journey, from the weakest colony mocked and abandoned to a beacon of resistance and hope. The galaxy was vast, the fight far from over, but humanity had proven its strength. They were no longer the weakest. They were the spark that could light the stars. The war had changed everything. Years after the final destruction of the Zarkon superweapon, Epsilon 7 was no longer a forgotten, barren world. It had become a thriving hub, a symbol of resilience, unity, and the power of hope in the darkest times. The colony that had once been called Earth's weakest was now a beacon to countless other worlds across the galaxy. Jace stood on the same ridge where so many battles had been planned and so many difficult decisions made. The twin suns of Epsilon 7 shone warmly across a landscape transformed. Where once there had been scorched earth and craters, now fields of hardy crops waved gently in the breeze. New buildings, strong and beautiful, dotted the horizon, constructed not just for defense but for life, for community. He looked out over the colony with a quiet pride, but also with a deep sense of responsibility. The victory over the Zarkon Empire had come at a great cost. Friends lost, families broken, sacrifices made. And yet, from that pain had grown something powerful. The alien allies, once strangers and sources of fear, were now partners and friends. Their ships flew alongside human vessels in patrols that protected the colony and its neighbors. Children born on Epsilon 7 grew up speaking both human languages and the tongues of their alien neighbors, learning from each other and dreaming of a galaxy without war. Jace thought often about those early days when survival had meant hiding, when victory had been a miracle fought in 7 desperate minutes. The memory of the invasion, the shock, the fear, and then the fierce fight back, was seared into his mind. But so was the image of the colonists standing together, battered but unbroken, proving that even the weakest could become strong. Mara approached quietly, her footsteps soft on the rocky ground. She stood beside him, looking out over the colony. "We've come a long way," she said, voice filled with warmth and wonder. Jace nodded. "We still have a long way to go." "But the foundation is solid," Mara continued. "This place, these people, they're ready." They talked about the future, the challenges of rebuilding not just the colony, but an entire system torn apart by war. The work was ongoing, resources were still precious, and threats remained, but the spirit of the people was unbreakable. Jace remembered the countless faces of those who had fallen. Their sacrifices were woven into the fabric of the colony's new life. Monuments and memorials honored their bravery, stories were told and retold, and the lessons of the past guided every decision. In the years since the war, the Coalition had grown. More worlds joined, inspired by Epsilon 7's example. Together they built networks of support, defense, and diplomacy. The galaxy was far from peaceful, but the tides were turning. Jace found himself taking on new roles beyond the battlefield. He became a leader not just in war, but in peace, helping to shape the future of the coalition, mentoring young fighters, and advocating for unity among the diverse species. One afternoon, Jace visited a school where children gathered to learn history, science, and the stories of the Resistance. As he spoke to them, he saw hope reflected in their eyes, a hope born from hardship, but aimed at something greater. Afterward, as he walked through the bustling streets, a young girl ran up to him, clutching a small model spaceship. "Will we fly to the stars someday?" she asked, eyes shining. Jace smiled, lifting her onto his knee. "We already are," he said, "and one day you'll lead us even further." That night, Jace and Mara stood once more on the ridge, watching the twin moons rise. The stars twinkled overhead, silent witnesses to a galaxy forever changed. "We fought hard," Mara said softly, "and we won more than battles." "We won ourselves," Jace replied. "Our place in the stars, our future as the colony below hummed with life." Jace felt a deep peace. The war had been brutal and costly, but it had proven one truth. No matter how weak you seem, if you stand together and refuse to give up, you can change the course of history. The galaxy was vast, the challenges ahead many, but the flame of hope burned brighter than ever. And Earth's weakest colony was now its strongest light,